I played 100 Days of Dave the Diver, and here's what happened. Hi friends, and welcome to Dave the Diver, a game about diving for fish by day and running a sushi restaurant by night. As a real-life marine biologist and currently full-time gaming YouTuber, Dave the Diver quickly became one of my go-to relaxation games during my first playthrough that I casually streamed over on Twitch, and I fell in love with the game. In honor of the new Jungle DLC coming out this year, I thought it'd be fitting to revisit Dave the Diver with a classic YouTube challenge. Play 100 days of the game with the bonus challenge of seeing just how close to 100%ing the game I can get. So with that challenge in mind, let's answer Cobra's phone call and get ourselves to the blue hole. Cobra, one of the main characters of Dave the Diver, is a somewhat sketchy entrepreneur with the brilliant idea of opening a sushi restaurant supplied by fish from the magical blue hole, a water body that replenishes and changes every day, granting the consumer the unique opportunity to try rare and exotic fishes in the form of sushi. So with the knowledge that I am Dave, Dave is a diver, and divers go spearfishing, it's time to take my first dip into the blue hole. Day 1 involves the tutorial for my trusty spear gun to catch fish, and also my dive knife for anything that gets a little too close to me. Importantly, my oxygen meter also functions as my health bar, so it's important to keep that topped up to make the most of my time underwater. The vast majority of Dave the Diver gameplay takes place during 2 daily dives, one morning dive and one afternoon dive, where you attempt to gather as much fish as possible for your sushi restaurant. In the early stages, there's also a limit on how deep you can go before the added pressure drains your oxygen, i.e. your health, quite a lot faster. So after completing my first 2 tutorial dives, Dave of course thinks that his day is over and he can go home to rest. But of course not. Cobra conveniently forgot to mention that my new day job is also a part-time night gig, where I have to act as manager and server of Bancho Sushi, headed by the enigmatic sushi chef named, you'll never guess it, Bancho. A man of relatively few words and relatively high expectations, Bancho demands that I run the restaurant as the solo staff member while he prepares all of the sushi. I'll do it, because what choice do I have? And I'm only mildly unhappy about it. But with a handful of customers served and 16 whole bucks in my pocket, it's time to move on to day 2. Not before a certain tentacled creature makes itself known, though. In the morning, we meet the next character we'll be encountering throughout the next 98 days, Ellie, who studies biology at the local graduate school. I want you all to take a second and appreciate this top-tier edit that one of my mods made because I too was studying biology at the local graduate school. Anyways, Ellie introduced herself as a scientist conducting ecological research on the blue hole, and needs my help to gather samples for her upcoming paper. I guess that's another item to add to my growing to-do list. But for the most part, I'm mostly focused on gathering as much fish as I possibly can to increase the amount of money I make at my next dinner service. Between my morning and afternoon dive, Cobra introduced me to yet another interesting character by the name of Duff, who, to not put too fine a point on things, could use a little more time outside. Duff is special for a number of reasons, but we mostly care about him because he can make weapons for me. Weapons meaning guns, that is. Although guns don't work well underwater in real life, every good video game requires at least some suspension of disbelief, and we're already spearfishing in a magical cenote, so what difference does a submerged pew-pew make? Regardless, the guns are important because they grant a higher base damage than my measly spear gun, which is critical for taking down larger prey, kind of like this white-tip reef shark that I encountered during my afternoon dive. Although I didn't have the resources to make a gun quite yet, I did manage to take down the white-tip shark with my spear gun, and I grabbed another inventory full of fish, came up for another minorly successful dinner service, and time passed smoothly till the next morning. Day 3 is where things get a bit more interesting. Day 3 introduces the somewhat eccentric Dr. Bacon, an anthropologist who is obsessed with an ancient sea people civilization that may or may not exist. Cobra willingly signed me up for all of Dr. Bacon's requested endeavors, so of course, I have no choice but to dive into the depths and see what they hold for me. The morning dive was uneventful and just a series of collecting my desired fishes for that night's restaurant service. But when I resurfaced, I reconnected with Duff to make my first firearm. He pulled some mystical mechanical magic, and suddenly I had another type of weapon in my arsenal. Before I could jump back into the water for my afternoon dive to test out my new equipment, Cobra stopped me, saying that the restaurant had been repaired and was ready to fully open for business. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that day 1 had an earthquake that completely wrecked Bancho Sushi, and I had to pay for the repairs. Anyways, upon arriving to the restaurant, Cobra mentioned that we needed a good way to advertise Bancho Sushi. And what better way to market our business than through an in-game Instagram clone called Cooksta? While mostly being a photo-sharing app on Dave's phone, Cooksta is also the ranking system for the restaurant in the game. So the higher our Cooksta rating is, the better perks I unlock, so it is something that I will be paying attention to for the next 96 days. After my brief break at the restaurant, I headed back to the water for my afternoon dive, where I was met with the very pleasant surprise that was a bottlenose dolphin. Fun fact, when I was working on my master's in marine biology, these guys frequently visited the dock that I worked on, so I got to hang out with plenty of bottlenose dolphins. It was pretty rad. You're not supposed to interact with dolphins in real life to help prevent human attachment, but this dolphin clearly needed my help. So after following it for a while, I found its companion trapped under a fishing net, which I was able to remove with my trusty dive knife. As thanks, the pair left behind a shiny pearl that I could sell to Cobra for a nice profit, but not before I finished catching the rest of my carrying capacity of fish and returning to the surface. When I arrived at Bancho Sushi, an unexpected guest arrived with me. Someone from Bancho's past by the name of Yoshie, who wants, or rather doesn't want, but Bancho is insisting for some reason, a dish made of whole roasted shark head. By a stroke of luck, I had the ingredients on hand and was able to serve it to her right away, and apparently the dish blew her mind just a little bit. Enough so that she wanted to help Bancho Sushi succeed by acting as a recruiter through which I could hire staff for my restaurant. With the job listing set out and the possibility of not doing every single task by myself, it was finally time to move on to day 4. My first objective of the day was to retrieve the Sea People artifact that Dr. Bacon had asked me to grab the day prior that I was too lazy to grab the first time around, which was pretty simple. When I came back up to give it to him, I met yet another strange character by the name of Sato. Through some very thinly veiled Pokemon references, this guy, who looks like Ash after 4 midlife crises, explained that I can collect Marinka cards, aka cards for every fish in the game, which is more or less a progression tracker to make sure that you grab everything at the highest possible quality. I don't have the time nor the equipment to deal with all of that yet, so it was simply back on to the rest of the day. After nothing significant during my afternoon dive, I headed back to the restaurant, only to find that Yoshie had managed to actually hire someone to help me at the restaurant. And as an even better bonus, Kyoko was free for me to hire, so I'm assuming that Yoshie was covering her signing deal. So with another set of hands running food, we quickly unlocked the bronze level cooksta, which would allow me to hire yet more staff to help in the restaurant. The morning of day 5, Dr. Bacon was back with quote-unquote the luckiest news, that he had yet more work for me to do for free. So lucky, I know. But after upgrading some of my equipment to handle deeper dives and carry more fish, I returned to the watery depths, where I was immediately met by one of our bottlenose dolphin friends from earlier. After following an apparently distressed dolphin for a while, it quickly became apparent why that dolphin needed me, or more accurately, my opposable thumbs. Pirates were actively in the process of hauling away our pink dolphin friend, and dolphin kidnapping is something that I simply will not stand for. So after evading a couple of ill-wishing swashbucklers and a lot of spamming my left click, the pink dolphin was finally freed from its fibrous cage, and the dolphins were once again free to roam the blue hole. Once again, they left me some monetary compensation for my time, which is better than I can say for Dr. Bacon. Or Cobra, who has me picking up a drone that got lost in a shipment, and of course that means I'm responsible for finding it. Not before I finish the day with yet another restaurant service though. Day 6 started, like many of the days before it, with Dr. Bacon showing up and asking me for yet more favors. This time he wants me to follow a radar signal down to an area and set off a ton of underwater bombs to open up a passageway, because there's no possible way that that can go wrong. But before I can even hop in the water, Ellie comes in and asks if I can gather some shell samples for an important paper. As long as I'm swimming around and doing favors for everyone else, what's one more task to pile on? Once I finally started diving for the day, I immediately went down to check out that area that Dr. Bacon had asked me to explore. Shockingly, blowing up the pile of big rocks didn't seem to cause any noticeable damage to me or the environment, which is good, because behind that pile of rocks was the Sea People record chamber, which Dr. Bacon said is solid evidence of a Sea People civilization in this area. Also, Dr. Bacon asked me to take some photos with the camera that he gave me, which I guess is a reasonable ask compared to everything else that he asked me to do. So with my photo and a bonus artifact in hand, I headed back to the surface. Before I could even talk to Dr. Bacon about today's amazing find, I was intercepted by a group of people on a boat who call themselves Sea Blue. They're charismatic and definitely not overcompensating for something leader John Watson, or as I like to call him John Watson, introduced them as a group of environmentalists who track down people who pollute the ocean, and they were none too pleased with my little shebang earlier. Fortunately, they don't really have anything against me yet, but I highly doubt that this will be the last time I see them. But before I could celebrate my mini victory over John Watson, I returned my research samples to Ellie, who informed me that these samples were not, in fact, for a research paper, but instead for a mission-based environmental app called EcoWatcher. In terms of gameplay, EcoWatcher missions just mean collecting a certain number of a given resource type and turning it in to gain quote-unquote research levels and sometimes some bonus equipment. But this wasn't for the paper that I thought I was helping Ellie with. Now, as someone who has written a master's thesis, it is true that we outsource some of our label to other people. That's what undergrads are for, not random hardworking diving fishermen. Speaking of fishing, the afternoon dive went off without a hitch, so off to Bancho Sushi for the evening I went. When I arrived at the restaurant, my usual dinner prep was interrupted by a camera crew, along with a VIP named Vincent, aka the Gourmet. Apparently, these people came to film a TV show called Star the Chef, and wanted to see this newly popular restaurant on Cookstone. After a bit of back and forth, they gave Bancho 2 days to prepare an outstanding dish, which Bancho asked me to retrieve some special ingredients for. Now, because I'm so incredibly good at my job, I already had those ingredients on hand and we could just play the next couple of days normally until Vincent came back with his camera crew. And that's pretty much exactly what I did. The next morning, Dr. Bacon came back to give me the artifact that I had retrieved yesterday, as it was some sort of bracelet and Dr. Bacon wanted to use me as a lab rat in addition to performing all of his dirty work. Fortunately for me, it just had a little stat bonus that lets you live for a little bit longer after running out of oxygen. Not that I would ever need that, because I don't make mistakes. With my new bracelet on, Dr. Bacon says that he tracked even more sea people signals down to the deeper parts of the blue hole. But unfortunately, with the recent stop in shipments, I need to outsource some of the equipment that I needed. Enter our dear friend and weapons dealer, Duff, who tells me that he'll get the headlamp that I need to track down Dr. Bacon's signal if I retrieve a figurine for him out of a shipwreck. A figurine of an anime-adjacent girl named Leia's-chan, that is. So down I went into the depths in hopes of retrieving Duff's magical girl figurine. When I finally made it down to the shipwreck, Duff expressed his totally normal level of excitement towards seeing a definitely water-damaged package of his precious Leia's-chan. But of course, nothing in this game could be as simple as me just picking up the box and bringing it back to Duff, because the instant that I went to do so, a giant tentacle popped out from beneath the shipwreck, dragging Duff's precious Leia's-chan down with it. I tried to get out of my assignment by saying that the doors of the ship were all locked, but Duff of course had a solution for that. So after a quick trip back up and down from the boat, I was able to cut open the top of the shipwreck in a mini welding tracking minigame. I honestly don't even know what else to call this minigame. With the ship open, the game warned me that once I entered, an event would proceed that would have me returning to the boat, which is a nice warning to have, but really, what choice do I have? So inside I went. Instead of a boat interior, this spits me out into an underwater cavern, by the end of which is a giant squid, conveniently guarding Duff's precious figurine. Despite my best attempt at being sneaky, this still woke the sleeping giant and triggered the game's first boss fight. The gimmick for this particular fight is mostly in evading its tentacles erupting from the various parts of the cavern, while you get close enough to use your weapon. In this case, I was trying to shoot the giant squid's eye. Interestingly, colossal squids and giant squids are actually different animals, and I would argue that this creature is closer to a colossal squid than a giant squid due to A, its sheer size, as colossal squids are the largest invertebrates in the world, and B, the size of its eye, which is the spot that I'm targeting. Colossal squid eyes are the largest known eyes in the animal kingdom, being about 28 centimeters in diameter, or 11 to 12 inches for those using freedom units. That's obviously still a lot smaller than whatever this guy has, but I like rambling about marine biology. So after my little tangent and a couple of shots to the eye, this squid creature was finally taken down. As the squid collapsed, another figure appeared, distressed and speaking some language that I didn't understand. They collapsed pretty much immediately and another figure appeared to help them, got frightened by my very intimidating presence, and fled away together speaking that same unknown language. With the giant squid situation resolved, I was finally able to grab Duff's figurine, as well as cut off a bit of the massive squid to see if Bancho could make any cool sushi with it. Duff was particularly excited to get his doll, and I think that Dave's expression pretty perfectly captures how I felt about this interaction. Bancho said that the squid tentacle meat I retrieved isn't suitable for serving to restaurant patrons, but he'd make a special dish for all of us and the friends of the restaurant. So for the first time, I wasn't responsible for serving other people in the evening, and I got to kick back and relax a little bit. And we transitioned not so smoothly into day 8. Dr. Bacon stopped by in the morning, both showing and telling me that he drank too much the night before, but was excited about the discovery of potential sea people. He asked me to go see what was behind that radar signal from the deep dark deep down. John Watson had other plans for me though. As soon as I entered the water, he confronted me, even accusing me of creating Dr. Bacon's mess. For some environmental activists, John Watson is not the most environmentally friendly, considering his response to this whole scenario was to start lobbing bombs everywhere. So if I thought nothing could go wrong with my one tiny explosion, boy did John Watson have another thing coming. Dave isn't against shooting aggressors though, so after a couple rounds and a couple of harpoon stabs, the former Navy SEAL John Watson had no choice but to flee. And of course he did this by blowing yet another gigantic hole in the seafloor, because that's what reef safety is all about. With John Watson out of the way, it was time to set about that quest that Dr. Bacon had sent me on, venturing into the deep dark deep down. This area is themed after some of the depths of the ocean, albeit not the abyssal depths, but still houses some really cool animals. Some notable deepwater fauna in the game include frilled sharks, which look infinitely more terrifying in real life, megamouth sharks, which look infinitely more terrifying in real life, and comb jellies, which are not at all terrifying in real life. Fun fact, I have always and will always call these guys by their proper name of ctenophores, because they are not actually jellies, nor are they even cnidarians. Ctenophores in real life are also super small and relatively easy to raise in captivity for scientific study, plus they have some fun iridescent qualities with their cilia. I don't think they would be particularly good eating, because a hydrostatic skeleton doesn't seem like it would be particularly tasty. Marine biology tangent aside, I did successfully follow Dr. Bacon's radar signal down to a hidden cave where I encountered the creatures I had met earlier. The male figure seemed particularly distressed that I was there, and it didn't seem that the female figure had recovered from her bout with the giant squid earlier. Seeing as they were still speaking in a language I couldn't understand, Dr. Bacon asked me to return to the boat while he found a way to translate. To create his translating device, Dr. Bacon said that he would need a stone tablet, a microphone, and an amethyst. The microphone was by where I had fought the giant squid, the stone tablet was in the record chamber, and the amethyst was in the deep down, which occupied the majority of my afternoon dive. Before I had even entered the water, I met a reporter for the weekly fish magazine by the name of Udo. He's a bit awkward, but I love him anyways, and plus he pays me whenever I take a good photo, and that will come in handy down the line. During my dive, I encountered this little fellow hiding in some stray shells and coral fragments. This is a real thing that certain kind of octopodes will do to avoid being detected by sharks, and it is super cool. Also, yes, octopodes is technically the correct plural of octopus, because it doesn't mix Greek and Latin roots, but I will not come after you with a pitchfork for saying octopi or octopuses the same way I would for calling my favorite animal starfish. Anyways, Dave seems determined to catch this octopus, following it through a metal door that I literally had to cut open to follow it through, only to end up in a dead-end cave that the octopus escaped from anyways. Another fun fact that most species of octopodes can fit through any gap larger than their beak, and the beak is generally pretty small, which means that octopodes can fit through some really small spaces. This bracelet was apparently too large for the hole that octopus escaped through though, so it was left behind and I took it as a souvenir. After finishing the rest of my dive normally, I headed back to the surface to give Dr. Bacon the materials for his translator that I had collected when I got a call from Bancho saying that there was an unusual customer waiting for me at the restaurant. While it wasn't what I was anticipating, it turns out that today was indeed the 3 days later that I had promised Bancho when he asked me to prepare the ingredients for Star the chef. The gourmet and Bancho both had a little kerfuffle about Bancho not using traditional techniques and ingredients, which seems to be Bancho's whole thing, but the gourmet ended up trying Bancho's sushi anyways and absolutely loved it. He loved it so much that he says that the only thing that would improve it would be for it to be served with a cold beer, which is basically the game's way of giving me yet more work to do during the restaurant portion. However, the interaction with Star the chef was not what Bancho had called me about, and instead he was referencing the very loud man sitting at the bar who introduced himself as Otto. Otto came in specifically requesting moray eel curry, which required the titular moray eel to create. Notably in this game, moray eels can only be caught during the night, which requires unlocking another game feature, the night dive. So basically, I can opt to dive one more time every day to gather unique fishes that are only active at night. It has a restricted access area, meaning I can't go too deep, and pretty much every single fish is aggressive, so I have to be more careful than I would be normally. But after some maneuvering and some careful harpoon shots, I did manage to gather a decent amount of ingredients, although I didn't quite have everything I needed for Otto just yet. So I went through dinner and had the rest of the evening like normal. The morning of day 9, Dr. Bacon swung by the dive boat to say that he had managed to construct a two-way sea people translating device so we could all understand each other. I hopped into the water to make my way back down to where the sea people were hiding in that cavern, but was promptly interrupted by a group of pirates attempting to kidnap my dolphin friends, which again, I will not stand for. Sometimes violence is the answer, kids. The dolphins clearly appreciated my show of force, even leaving a little bubble heart for me before swimming off into the distance, which meant that I was free to continue my journey into the deep down. I made my way back down to the cavern where the sea people were waiting, where I had a very pleasant introduction with the male figure who called himself Suam. After a little back and forth, Suam told me that the figure next to him was Ramo, the daughter of the Sea People village chief, and that she needed a special porridge made of some corals to get better. While I was running around the deep dark looking for those corals, I encountered these magical fish called oppas, which are notable for their large size, distinct coloration, and abnormally large pectoral fins. Being the intrepid diver that I am, of course, I stopped for a photo op with these guys, and certainly not just because I like cool animals. So after gathering everything that I had wanted, I returned to the surface where my new friend Udo came to reward me for my oppa photo, so clearly my side hobby has some benefits. I stopped by the restaurant to ask Bancho to make the coral porridge that Ramo needed, which he did in a very calm and orderly manner. That enthusiasm also allowed me to level up my cooks to standing again to the silver level. After heading back to the boat to bring the coral porridge down to the sea people, I was once again immediately interrupted by some local fauna, this time in the form of a massive humpback whale. Whales are one of those creatures that I feel you can't truly appreciate until you've seen them in the water in person, because there is nothing quite as magical as seeing an animal you know is also looking back at you, because there really isn't anything quite as magical as seeing an animal you know is looking back at you with the same wonder. There really wasn't much with this interaction, but I love whales, so I'm leaving it in. After that brief interlude, I did make my way back down to Ramo and Suam to give them the coral porridge that Bancho had made, which Suam immediately tried to take credit for. Regardless, it seemed to do the trick to make Ramo feel better, but clearly not better enough to do anything for herself, as she immediately asked me to escort her back to the Sea People village. Physically escort her, that is. So after a long and decently annoying voyage filled with many dangers and a few underwater earthquakes, I made it down to my depth limit, where Suam informed me that our path was blocked by a very large rock. Dave had the brilliant idea of clearing out those rocks by using the force of some other rocks falling down on them, but didn't have the necessary grip strength or gloves to pull out the pin holding the would-be falling rocks in place. Dr. Bacon says that he might have a fix after eavesdropping on my whole conversation and journey, and requests that I return to the boat, which I will gladly do. That meant the usual evening routine of making my way to the restaurant, only to be faced with yet another stranger who needs something from me. This time, the stranger took the form of a shy kid named Maki, who used a Cleone plushie as a proxy for their shyness. She demanded I serve her kombu and white trevally ochazuke, which Dave says sounds like something an old man would want. Unfortunately for Maki, her desired dish would have to wait, as I had already prepared to serve the previous stranger his desired dish of moray eel curry. Otto had a particularly strong reaction to this dish, launching into a long-winded backstory about his childhood, which went on for a while before he mentioned that he would do something for me in the empty back lot behind the restaurant. That sounds a tiny bit like a threat of being beat up in a back alley, but what do I have to lose? So after finishing the rest of the dinner service, I would have to wait until the next morning to see what Otto meant. Turns out that Otto is a very industrious man, and overnight had managed to build an entire aquaculture operation behind the restaurant. Basically, this new area allows me to gather fish eggs from fish that I catch, transfer those eggs into a section for their relative depth and region, and in a couple of days, boom, I have more fish of that type waiting for me that I can send directly to the restaurant. Additionally, if I have 2 or more fish of the same kind, they have a chance to reproduce overnight, which means that this is an easy way to gather large volumes of fish without having to catch every single one manually. It's great and will be very useful later on. So with this new fish farm up and running, it was time to start my first dive of the day, which was convenient because Dr. Bacon had already managed to acquire some better gloves for me. These gloves allowed me to grab onto objects affected by currents so I don't get constantly swept away, as well as to pick up objects like rocks or the stakes that I need to pull out of the deep dark deep down area. Additionally, these gloves let me pick up sea urchins, so that's nifty. With these gloves, I immediately headed back down to the deep dark deep down to help out Ramo and Suam, but along the way, I got a little distracted by a wandering oarfish. Oarfish are these long, serpentine-type fish that are thought to be responsible for some legends of sea serpents, because they are long, shiny, and honestly look pretty weird. There's also a decent amount of folklore, specifically from Japan, saying that these guys are a bad omen for disasters to come, even having earned the nickname of the doomsday fish. While superstition has its place, scientists have evaluated the connection between the appearance of deep-sea fishes and natural disasters and found no correlation. So it seems to be purely superstition and not some real phenomenon. Anyway, cool fish, me likey. I also got distracted by gathering other fish specimens, both for my new aquaculture setup as well as the restaurant, so I didn't actually do anything other than take a nice photo this dive, but that's okay, because that's what the afternoon dive is for. That dive also started with me getting immediately distracted by the return of another marine friend, the humpback whale we saw earlier. It was singing a distinctive song, which Dave wanted to record for Ellie to see if the whale was saying something particular. Unfortunately, we have yet to decode any sort of whale language in real life, but I cannot wait for the day that we do. While making my way to the deep dark deep down to actually help Ramo and Suam, I again got distracted, but this time by the octopus we encountered a couple of days ago. This time, it conveniently taught me how to use rocks to unlock new pathways, which was quite considerate, but not before immediately leaving me in the dust. Dave seems determined to catch and eat this octopus, which is not a motivation that I share, but it did leave me another little present. Thanks, octopus. And finally, at long last, I did make my way back down to Suam and Ramo, removing those stakes that were holding up some rocks. They fell with enough force to dislodge the other rocks that were blocking my path, so we could safely make our way to the Sea People village. That's what I thought anyways, because of course there was a massive wolf eel guarding the entrance, which is the second boss fight I encountered in this playthrough. Wolf eels are actually a little scary in real life due to their relatively large size and relatively pointy teeth, but I still find morays to be a little more intimidating. Morays have something called a pharyngeal jaw, which I always remembered by the little rhyme, when the jaws open wide and there's more jaws inside, that's a moray. And morays will use their extra set of jaws to latch onto prey that is trying to escape. So instead of just having to evade once, they have to evade twice. And as you can probably guess, that doesn't work terribly often. Wolf eels, on the other hand, aren't even technically eels, but rather a kind of ray-finned fish. In this particular instance, it also has a big glowing tail that marks its weak spot, which after hitting it enough, I was finally able to take down this massive predator. Of course, I also grabbed a little sample for Bancho, as wolf eels are generally considered to be good eating. Completing the wolf eel boss fight allowed me entry to the Sea People village, which is probably one of the coolest reveals in the game. Not all of the locals were particularly happy to see me though, which ended in an audience with the Sea People village chief, Tenzin. Tenzin was particularly excited to get his daughter back in one piece, but not particularly excited that a human had accompanied her. Turns out that Sea People and humans have a long history, and it doesn't seem to be a great one, but Rommel convinced Tenzin that the massive tremors happening around the blue hole are in urgent need of attention, and maybe the humans, specifically Dave, could help with them. Tenzin seemingly has reservations about Dave helping out, but said that if I could win the village people's trust by performing some chores and other small tasks, he'd be inclined to let me help a little bit more. Tenzin also gave me a handy mirror that allows me to instantly teleport to the Sea People village, or between discovered mirrors like the one that I found in the record chamber, which means slightly less aimless swimming between locations. This whole adventure ended up taking a lot longer than anticipated, both in real time and in in-game time, so by the time I got back to the surface, I had already missed the restaurant portion of the evening. When I stopped by to check if anything of note had happened, Yoshie walked in. We got to talking, and Yoshie revealed that Bancho once gave up on cooking because of a certain incident, an incident that Yoshie happened to be privy to. Flashback time, baby! In this Ace Attorney-style segment of the game, we play as Yoshie interacting with the staff at the Dugong Hotel, a 5-star hotel with apparently both tradition and a long history, where the esteemed actress-turned-food critic Lois Crawford has made a reservation, and the staff are preparing for her visit. Crawford is a notoriously harsh critic, and we have no choice but to accept her reservation and do everything as best as we possibly could to meet her very high expectations. Unfortunately, the head chef was away in France on a culinary research trip, meaning the Michelin star chef who would have prepared Crawford's food was unavailable. That left only the new sous chef, Bancho, who specialized in Japanese cuisine. Bancho had an impressive resume of top-tier restaurants, but hopped from place to place after learning what they could teach him. Bancho agrees to fix a Japanese dinner set for Miss Crawford, which is a modified sushi set that includes soup, an hors d'oeuvre, side dishes, sushi, tempura, and a dessert. All of that is well and good until Bancho mentions wanting to go a little further into the untraditional side, adding a little flair to an otherwise normal menu. Bancho wants to make a tempura fried shark head. Yoshie thinks this is a terrible idea and successfully convinces Bancho to make the standard shrimp tempura. Then comes the day of Lois Crawford's visit to the Dugong Hotel. As is to be expected by her introduction, Crawford's review of Bancho's menu is scathing, and she seems none too pleased with the rather ordinary menu. That's when Bancho steps in, saying that he could indeed make better sushi, and he served it, the whole roasted shark head. It all comes full circle, friends. Crawford had a strong reaction to the presentation and refused to even touch it, continuing Bancho's theme that people are often too willing to disregard that which they have never tried. Crawford storms out of the hotel, most likely to leave a bad review of this esteemed location. Bancho quit and left, saying that he needed to train, which is where Yoshie says that she supposes his stubbornness is what led Bancho to his current position, and even started social media with Dave's influence. Dave promises to help Bancho continue to learn, and just like that, we're back into the chaotic mess of our 100-day challenge. When I was originally storyboarding this video, it was conceptually, can you 100% Dave the Diver in 100 days? Because I'm a completionist and I like doing things all the way. Now, dear viewer, you've probably noticed that that is not the title of this video, because it turns out no. No, you cannot 100% Dave the Diver in 100 days, no matter how hard you try or how good you are. That's for a few reasons that I'll talk about as they become relevant. But the first reason, and arguably the most frustrating one, is because of that dish that Yoshie asked us to make on day 3, and what Bancho had tried to make for Lois Crawford years earlier. The whole roasted shark head, and also the very first multi-ingredient dish in the game. While the dish itself only has 2 ingredients, those being the white shark head and olive oil, the white shark head itself is what makes this dish problematic. Olive oil is pretty easily farmed in large quantities from my staff going out and retrieving it, along with buying it from Django whenever he's around. You'll understand what that means in a little while, but don't worry about it, olive oil is relatively easy to get. The white shark head, on the other hand, is a whole different story. So most large or advanced fish catches have the potential to drop a bonus item that are mostly used as an extra source of income when sold to Cobra, or used to upgrade weapon types when given to Duff. That includes things like the poison sacks from Starry Puffers to make a poison rifle, or lionfish thorns to make a poison shotgun. These extra drops are normally chance-based and can only be gathered when gathering a fish type manually, aka they cannot be farmed in the aquaculture setup that Otto made for me yesterday. The one and only time this secondary loot type is used in a sushi dish is, as you probably guessed, the white-tip shark head. The one saving grace is that a white-tip shark will always drop one shark head, because every shark has a head. That's good. What isn't good is that the whole roasted shark head dish still requires the same volume of shark heads to upgrade as any other sushi ingredient, meaning that going from level 1 to level 2 costs 3 shark heads. Level 2 to level 3 costs another 4 shark heads, and if you wanted to get all the way to level 10 with this dish, you would need a bare minimum of 221 white-tip shark heads to serve a maximum level whole roasted shark head. The issue with that is that not every dive will spawn with a white-tip shark, so at best, you are getting a maximum of 2 shark heads a day. Some quick math will tell you that 2 times 100 is 200, or 21 shark heads short of the number necessary to reach max level. Theoretically, this could be possible with some god-level RNG where you get a white-tip shark every dive and some bonus night dives, but realistically that isn't happening in 99 out of 100 runs of 100 days. It's well known amongst Dave the Diver completionists that the whole roasted shark head is the bottleneck factor to finishing the game, but I didn't know that going in and ended up being quite frustrated by the very first recipe you unlock being the one to hold you back in the late game. However, none of that could stop me from doing my level best to complete everything I could in 100 days, which brings us back to the morning of day 11, wherein I was immediately greeted by Dr. Bacon. Apparently, he was a bit worried that I didn't show up last night and that he couldn't reach me by radio. That's when I had to tell this professional anthropologist, who has been searching for this specific knowledge his entire life, that I was busy in the Sea People village that was only theorized to exist. Dr. Bacon exhibited the proper amount of academic excitement before Dave gave a quick summary of everything that I had done the days prior. So with that little interlude out of the way, I used the mirror that Tenzin gave me yesterday to quickly make my way down to the Sea People village to start earning the locals' trust. This involved a lot of small and simple tasks, like taking dumplings from the restaurant owner Mina over to the guards at the gate, bringing flowers from the temple down to the statue of King Long, who is apparently a very important person in Sea People lore, but apparently we'll have to learn more about that later, and taking a quick break to listen to some music. After running out of quick tasks to do around the village, I returned to the surface and quickly started my second dive. Nothing of note really happened during this dive. I was just focused on grabbing the ingredients for the dish that Maki had asked me to make so long ago. After finishing that dive and heading to the restaurant to make Maki's ochazuke, Otto stopped by to talk about the Sea People. During our conversation, another unexpected stranger showed up, a movie director by the name of Michael Bang. Apparently, Bancho is a big fan of this guy and found significance behind Michael Bang's fury of explosions and pyrotechnics, and offered to make sushi to inspire Bang's next movie. So, Bang gives Bancho a 3-day deadline to get everything ready, but is concerned that the region's rice won't live up to Bang's expectations. Fortunately, Otto has been hanging around this whole time and says that he has a way to help, and that I should see him in the morning. Before I could get to that though, I had to serve Maki the food that she had waited for, and at least the plushie seemed pretty pleased with the result. Maki, on the other hand, broke down in tears, revealing that it reminds her of her father who went missing. As a favor, she asked if I would pick up some Cleone, more commonly known as sea angels, while I was wandering around the deep down, which I am happy to do. Of course, I needed a net to do so, and Maki happily provided a bug net to add to my equipment arsenal. And with that, we moved on to day 12. If you thought the timeline for this video was moving slowly already, honey, you've got a big storm coming. One of the things that became glaringly obvious the further I got into this project is that unlike my typical genre of survival crafting games, days in Dave the Diver won't pass without active player actions. The morning dive doesn't only last for 15 minutes, nor does the afternoon dive. The only part of this game that is actually time sensitive is the evening restaurant portion, during which the clock will slowly tick down for the time Bancho Sushi is open for business. Beyond that, it is entirely up to me to see how long each dive will last. So unlike trying to play 100 days in a different game like Minecraft where a day-night cycle is roughly 20 minutes, playing 100 days of Dave the Diver took me well over 100 hours of in-game time, and I was determined to make the most of it. Day 12 was possibly the best example of my dedication to this project, where this single day took roughly 2.5 hours, but a whole lot happened, starting with a call from Otto that he wanted me to take a stop back at the field behind Bancho Sushi, where he had set up a crop farm to make more ingredients for the restaurant. The fact that Otto continues to do this kind of thing overnight is magical, and so is the rice paddy that he built. This crop farm allows me to produce a different variety of higher quality rice to help with the whole Michael Bang situation, and that higher quality rice can then be used in more advanced recipes. So after setting up my rice paddy, I headed back to the boat, where I got the notification that a jelly party would be taking place in 3 days. So I had to add that to my list of specific ingredients to catch along with everything else that needed doing. I was mostly focused on finishing the tasks required to earn the Sea People's trust so that I could continue with the bulk of the story. Some of these tasks included catching some stray seahorses for the parlor owner, participating in a sea people wedding, which felt a bit weird as an outsider, and getting a ball back from a megamouth shark for some mermaid children. As I was swimming around to gather some more special coral for yet another batch of sea people porridge, I was casually catching some sea angels to fulfill Maki's request, when, right as I caught the last of 10, a massive Cleone appeared and siphoned up Dave, starting a very strange boss fight with the Cleone Queen. As I've said, the common name for these guys is the sea angel, which I think is pretty apt given its winged appearance. Sea angels are actually a kind of mollusk, or more specifically a gastropod. Mollusks make up the second largest phylum of life on this planet after arthropods, because there are a whole whackload of insects and slightly less of a whackload of everything else. Mollusks may be the most diverse group of life though, considering they encompass the bivalves that I have dedicated altogether too much of my life to, cephalopods like octopods and chambered nautili, Aplacophora, which are these worm-looking things called solenogasters that live on the seafloor, and many other things, including all of the gastropods. Gastropods in and of themselves are a majorly diverse group of animals, like your common snail, all those things that have swirly little shells, as well as some things without shells like nudibranchs. Sea angels are obviously in that category of shellless gastropods, specifically in a category of opisthabranchs, which might be one of my favorite words to say. They're more closely related to animals like sea hares, which are also opisthabranchs. Hopefully this monologue was both informative and enough to distract you from the fact that I really struggled with this boss fight. But I did manage to successfully take down the Cleone Queen, who dropped a framed photo on the ground. A framed photo of Maki, that is, which I of course brought directly to Maki. This sparked an incredibly sad cutscene where a recording of Maki's father basically told her that he had been a bad father, and he had abandoned her for work and overall abandoning her after he failed his mission. Maki decides that she wanted to show her father that she is doing fine and working hard, so Bancho takes her under his wing to train as a sushi chef. I have no clue how old Maki is, but there is no way that that is legal. I also brought Bancho back a cutting of the Cleone Queen's meat, and that was enough to bump up my cook skill level to gold. But like I mentioned, day 12 was long, and this was just the morning dive, so back in we go. After making my way down to the Sea People village, I helped the village priest repair the big statue of King Long that had been damaged by some of the tremors earlier. I needed to be slightly more productive during this dive in terms of gathering fish, so I started exploring other parts of the blue hole that I hadn't seen in a while. That's when I found this abandoned humpback whale calf that needed an escort out of a cave it had hidden itself in. This did involve petting the calf to get it to trust me, which you absolutely should not do in real life, but I really enjoyed doing in the game. After gaining the baby whale's trust, I led it through the blue hole to the surface, fending off many ill-wishing creatures along the way. Right as I thought we had gotten to a safe place, a whole shiver of white-tipped sharks appeared. Fortunately, this baby's much larger mama also appeared, which was more than sufficient to scurry those sharks away, and avoiding a fight I definitely didn't need, although the shark heads would have been nice. With mama and baby reunited, I headed back to the surface to end the afternoon, where the whales gave me one final send-off. I did opt to do a quick night dive to gather some extra ingredients, but nothing of note happened. In fact, the next thing of note to happen happened after I had shut down Bancho Sushi for the night. The nighttime of day 12 was not the typical screen going dark of other days, because instead we had to see what Duff's life was like. Specifically his nightlife, or rather dream life, which apparently includes attending a concert of his favorite figurine, the precious Leias-chan. This was quite possibly the weirdest segment of this entire game, as Duff's character sang a song and we played a rhythm game to control the lights in the crowd. Good thing I have a music degree and rhythm games aren't difficult for me, otherwise I likely would have had to endure this entire sequence more than once. Trust me, once was enough. So with Duff satisfied and his totally normal dream, it is, at long last, time to move on to day 13. The first order of business was to return to Tenzin, as I had finally garnered enough of a reputation with the Sea People that I could help them deal with the tremors plaguing the blue hole. He told me that in order to access the area that might be causing the tremors, I would have to retrieve the glacial passage key, which had been kept in an abandoned cave outside of the village. Suam was supposed to come with me, but instead opted to quote-unquote guard the gate, telling me of horror stories of corrupted sea people that were once kept in there. But it's been like 1,000 years, so it should be fine, right? Spoiler alert, it was not fine. After solving a little puzzle to grab the glacial passage key, some tremors caused the internal cave to partially collapse. This in turn allowed the 1,000-year-old corrupted sea people to roam around, and they are apparently quite aggressive. I really do not like this section of the game, mostly because I don't like horror-adjacent content at all. So fighting my way through the corrupted sea people, and after a small heart attack, I finally had the key in hand and was ready to return to Tenzin. But again, it couldn't be that easy because nothing is that easy. Guess who had come crashing back? John Watson. He immediately started his own boss fight, this time with a mechanical suit that shot grenades. This particular boss fight is probably the hardest in the game for me, because it requires using a baseball bat to launch those grenades back at John's stupid face, and I am not particularly good at that. So much so that this was the one and only time that I died in this entire playthrough. Fortunately, dying during a boss fight just restarts the fight from the first save point, and I was able to take down John Watson on my second attempt. I stole a bit of his slightly exploded suit to bring to Cobra, then went about my merry little way to bring the key back to Tenzin. Tenzin then proceeded to launch into a very artistic explanation of the Sea People's history, which simplifies down to the fact that there was once a technician who wanted more power, and thought the best way to do so would be to draw more power from the Divine Tree, which is the center of the Sea People's existence. The technician began to infuse the energy into an ancient creature named Yaoi, along with some of the people. The infused Sea People encountered some minor health complications in the form of being violent and mangled, so they were imprisoned in that scary area that I went through earlier, where they can apparently live for thousands of years. The corrupted Sea People, called Godons, may still be roaming in the Glacial Passage, which is where Tenzin wants me to go so I can check on the Divine Tree and make sure everything is still honky-dory down there. But first, the Sea People villagers still had some tasks that they needed help with. Specifically, Mina asked if I could find the village's seaweed collector who seems to have gone missing, and Linchin needs me to find her escaped pet squid named Selgio. There were a couple of other minor tasks, like grabbing a book for the seed seller, and the seaweed farmer asking if I could make an extraordinary seaweed dish to prove that I was worthy of using his fields to grow seaweed for bancho sushi. Obviously, that last one was more of a bancho task than for me, so I was off to go find Selgio and the seaweed collector. Selgio was actually pretty easy to find after following a shiny jellyfish around, although he didn't really want to come with me at first, but did leave his hidey hole after I offered him a tasty snack. Then I went off in search of the seaweed farmer, whom I found in his home, which was actively being rampaged by a rogue leatherback sea turtle. This rogue leatherback sea turtle was actually his companion, but needed some calming down after eating a plastic bag that she had mistaken for a jelly. This is why you should use reusable bags, kids. So with Selgio found and Donna cured, I was off to complete my last task for the Sea People, to find a missing kid who went to go see the underwater lake by themselves. This area is actually super cool and reminds me a lot of the Lost River from Subnautica, so of course I had to take a photo. This phenomenon can actually happen in real life, particularly when two water bodies of drastically different salinity and temperature meet along something called a halocline. Unfortunately, my wonder for this cave was cut a little short when I found the kid I was looking for, who was trapped in the corner of the cave by a massive goblin shark. Goblin sharks are probably one of the most iconic deepwater sharks due to their kind of hideous appearance with rows of very pointy teeth, but they don't really do that much. They can extend their jaws when feeding, which is part of why they look so weird, but I would argue that the pharyngeal jaws we talked about in Morays are infinitely more terrifying than these guys are. Anyways, this boss fight was more a matter of dealing enough damage than any particular phases or gimmicks, which made it fairly easy to take down and save the child, who promised that they wouldn't go off exploring on their own anymore. I would say that sealing this halocline was worth it though. On my way out, I stopped to take a quick photo of Donna in her natural habitat, eating food she's actually supposed to eat before heading over to the Sea People village for the last time of the day. While there, I returned Selgio to his sea person, and helped the blacksmith gather some fruits from the top of the Divine Tree to feed his forge. The rest of the day went pretty smoothly, just gathering some fish, until I decided to take a night dive. Stormy nights in this game are a bit special, because as Sato stopped to explain, you're more likely to unlock some special rare Marinka cards, i.e. unique boss fights. I thought I was just going to take a quick night dive to catch some box jellies, but instead I ended up in this weird cave where a giant hermit crab was using an entire construction truck as a shell. Hermit crabs can and will use any available debris as a shell so long as it's the appropriate size, but they generally prefer one of the coiled shells from the gastropods I talked about with the Cleone Queen. Fun fact, if a hermit crab finds a shell that's slightly too big for it to effectively molt into, it'll wait around for a little bit to see if another crab can use that shell, and then they'll swap so that everybody gets to grow. Very considerate. Unlike this particular crab, who seems determined to pummel me into pulp. Fortunately, that is nothing a few exploding barrels can't fix. And after grabbing some of that crab's massive claw meat, I headed back to the restaurant where I had a normal evening service. Dr. Bacon stopped by to talk about the day's discovery and about the Sea People history that I had learned, and then he headed off to his boat. As Dr. Bacon was presumably headed home for the night, he got a ping on his radar that told him some Sea People artifacts were nearby, so he headed over to a nearby cave to investigate. This is the one and only time that I played as Dr. Bacon, and most of it was spent uncovering some of the unpleasant history between Sea People and humans, which did serve to explain why I had to gather the Sea People's trust before being granted access to the Divine Tree. Humans had hunted the Sea People after a perceived betrayal, and it led to a pretty gory fallout. While investigating some potential artifacts in the cave, I heard voices outside, which turned out to be pirates who wanted whatever I had on me. This started an intense boat chase, which admittedly was significantly more difficult than I thought it would be, but I ended up making it through relatively unscathed. The pirates, on the other hand, did not. So with Dr. Bacon home safe, I was ready for day 14. This morning started with a call from Udo, both to thank me for my wonderful photo of the Halo client, and to ask if I would be willing to take a photo of some manta rays. I absolutely adore manta rays, so of course the answer was yes. After agreeing that I would do a night dive to photograph those mantas at some point in the near future, I once again headed down to the Sea People village to start my venture through the Glacial Passage. The inside of the Glacial Passage is more or less a long puzzle sequence, where you need to complete various tasks to progress. The first room has these switches that cause color-coordinated pillars to move out or retract, and every switch represents 2 colors, so you have to press them in the right order to make your way through. Fortunately, this is a pretty easy puzzle to do alone, seeing as Suam was supposed to come with me, but of course chickened out of any real responsibility. The area directly after this one had more of the Godons I had encountered while trying to retrieve the key. Any section of the game involving these guys is automatically my least favorite part of the game. Not a fan of the whole 800-year-old evil corrupted sea people thing. The final room of this part of the passageway was just a massive mural depicting parts of the Divine Tree and some ancient, non-corrupted sea people, which I took a photo of for Dr. Bacon. Then I promptly moved on to the next layer of the Glacial Passage, which had yet more puzzles to solve. This time they involved spinning tubes that had to be rotated into the proper orientation to let me through. This is also the first time that we get to defend ourselves from the Godons, considering that they hate light, and it turns out that striking a Divine Tree fruit produces a strong light. I will be using that mechanic a lot whenever I need to get around these guys, but for the most part, solving this puzzle is just a lot of holding the spacebar. Divine Tree fruits are also useful for more than just being a flashlight though, because apparently their light is also warm enough to melt ice. How Dave is holding it comfortably while it does that, I have no clue. After this room, it allowed me to open a massive passageway directly back to the entrance, which is nice for when I inevitably have to return here at some point down the line. But for now, I was on the third puzzle area, which takes what we know and love from the first 2 chambers and combines them. So now there are colorful switches and spinny tubes. Once again, it involved carrying a Divine Tree fruit somewhere to melt some ice, and then plopping it into some weird fish head that makes the fruit shoot a beam of light. That beam of light made its way all the way out to the mirror in the main room, so theoretically I could use the heat of the Divine Tree fruit to melt the ice blocking the way down to the next chamber. While that's great in theory, it didn't work in practice because I wasn't able to rotate the mirror due to a lodged rock, so that's a problem for Cobra on a different day. With the first part of the Glacial Passage completed, I headed back to the surface for my evening restaurant time, where I knew that our special VIP guest was waiting. After harvesting my very first batch of rice, I gave Bancho all of the ingredients necessary to complete his masterpiece, and boy, he did not disappoint. Michael Bang lived up to his namesake with a mind-blowing experience, and he did seem quite inspired by Bancho's cooking. He gave me a poster, then went about his merry way. I finished the rest of the day as normal, and moved on to day 15. This morning, I was determined to finish the remainder of the Glacial Passage, so that involved going on a quick side mission to retrieve Cobra's lost crowbar, then heading down to the mirror to dislodge that pesky rock that had blocked my progress yesterday. That allowed the mirror to fall and melt the ice so that I could access the next level. Inside that level, there were some more fun puzzles to solve. This time, it involved using another fruit-powered fish head to light up some of the mirrors to melt some ice. I made my way through this area pretty steadily, taking photos of murals whenever I passed them. This was supposed to be the last puzzle room before the door to the glacial area, so I quickly made my way through. Inside, there was a very dark and large room with a single glowing Divine Tree fruit. So, like any normal human would do, I of course hit that to light up the place. Boy, was that a bad idea. Turns out there was a very large, very angry, and very scary Gadon in there, who thankfully was tethered down by some chains. I took the easy way out and scooted along, but clearly my nimble escape was not enough to deter that massive Gadon, who set about chasing me through this very long hallway. Remember what I said about any section with Godons being automatically my least favorite? I think this whole segment really takes the cake. The anxiety of being chased, trying to avoid all of the obstacles, and trying to avoid my own heart exploding is really not a fun combination. Just when you thought it was over after the big guy hits his head, no, of course it's not, because I got to do the same thing again, but this time as a vertical scroller. Surely he won't wake up after hitting his head again. Oh wait, he did! This whole sequence lasted about an entire 4 minutes, and I want you guys to know that I didn't make a single mistake that whole time. Please be proud of me. But finally, there is the exit. After a few quick-time events, I finally made it through the door, where I tried to grab the stake and collapse the entrance before that nasty creature could follow me. I was successful, but almost not fast enough, as that dreaded creature almost grabbed me. Fortunately, my knight in shining armor appeared, and Suam actually helped out for once, pulling me out of the way and saving my life. That opened up the entire glacial passage to the glacial area, which I'm going to need a better wetsuit before exploring. Turns out you need different gear for diving in the Arctic than you do for diving in the tropics. Who'da thunk? So Alma and I made our way back to Tenzin to tell him that the passageway was open, and about the massive Godon that I had escaped from. Tenzin kindly offered me some cloth made from divine tree fruits as a sort of warmer material, so I'll have to have that made into a new diving suit. That's a tomorrow problem though, because I got an email reminding me of a jellyfish party that would be taking place tonight, and I needed to spend at least a little time preparing for that. The preparation mostly involved swimming around and catching jellies. A travesty of an ordeal, I know. So after a nice and calm afternoon, I headed to Bancho Sushi to wrap up the day and made a pretty penny off of this jelly party. When I got there, a young man walked in and asked for vegetable sushi. After being told that we were not serving that, he went to leave, but stopped and noticed his own song playing in the background, Hot Pepper Tuna, which of course makes this young man MC Sammy. Sammy is apparently another media personality that Bancho likes, and will therefore try to make him the vegetable sushi that he had asked for. Only one problem: we don't know how to get vegetables. So I called up our resident handyman Otto, who can do anything and everything under the sun, and I told him about our predicament. Otto said that he'd work through the night, and he'd have something ready for me tomorrow. So with that, I served a lot of jelly sushis, made a bunch of money, and watched one of the sea people open a very ominous-looking book, and survived an earthquake to make it to day 16. That earthquake was no simple divine tree tremor, as it turns out, because that morning a new figure appeared out of a submarine. Miki introduced herself as a G-Force operative for the United Nations Godzilla Countermeasures Center. You heard that right, Godzilla. Apparently Godzilla is hiding somewhere in the blue hole while recovering from another fight, and I've gotta find him. So that's pretty much what I did with my morning dive. I followed this radar around until I found Godzilla holed up in the place where I had retrieved the glacial passage key from. The interior was different, and whether or not that means Godzilla ate all of the Godon is something that I do not know. But Godzilla was indeed here and was looking as intimidating as ever. He didn't seem all too pleased with me showing up, but that's no big deal. Miki asked if I would help set up a camera to keep an eye on him, so back to the surface I went. While I was there, I got to check out the wonderful new vegetable farm that Otto had built overnight. This farm operates a lot more like the farming from Stardew Valley, where I buy seeds from Otto, plant those seeds, water them every day, then harvest when ready. It's a nifty way to get more terrestrial ingredients. I also stopped by the restaurant to ask Bancho to make a dish for the seaweed farmer, since I had apparently forgotten to do that for the past couple of days. It seemed good enough for Gumo's refined palate, and that was enough to convince him to farm seaweed for me to use at the restaurant. All's well that ends well, I guess. While exploring the Sea People village to make sure that I hadn't missed any other tasks for an extended period of time, I popped into the games parlor to see if Selgio was doing alright, but I was met with something I absolutely did not expect. All of the sea people here were busy with what Junak described as Jimbo's game. Turns out that Jimbo's game is actually a reduced version of Balatro that came with a collab update, and yes, I will have to battle multiple villagers to finish the side quest. Notably, I was not at all interested in Balatro before this playthrough of Dave the Diver, but let's just say that it might have changed. So I wasted a bit of my afternoon dive attempting to learn poker, but eventually gave up for the day and grabbed some extra fish on my way out. I decided today would be a good day to go for a night dive to get some of the photos of manta rays that Udo had asked for. I set out my bait, set up my lights, and lived out one of my top 3 bucket list items in real life in the game. I really want to go diving with mantas at some point, but diving with whale sharks is still at the top of my list. Otherwise, I was having a decently calm night dive. But somewhere along the line, I was pulled into this interesting boss fight with a very large manta shrimp. Manta shrimps are probably one of my favorite crustaceans because they're just so strange. Like, who thought it would be a good idea to give a relatively small animal punching bags that can punch faster than the speed of sound? And yeah, most manta shrimps aren't nearly as big as you probably thought they were. All manta shrimps I've encountered in the wild were like 2 inches long or 5 centimeters for those not in freedom units. Also, the punching variety is just one type of manta shrimp. Others have long stabby spears that are just as fast as their punching counterparts, which makes them even more lethal. This specific boss fight is modeled after the peacock manta shrimp, which are mostly known for the distinct and bright colorations. These guys typically grow to roughly 10-ish centimeters in length, with the largest specimen being about 46 centimeters, or 18 inches. I'd say this boss is just a little bit larger. But after a quick pummeling, I took down the manta shrimp boss and headed back to the restaurant for a calm evening. The sushi portion was indeed calm, but the rest of the evening was distinctly not. That's because tonight marked my secret agent mission to the Sea Blue base, because the part that I had grabbed from John Watson wasn't good enough to make my new deep cold water wetsuit. So onto my little secret agent mission I went, which involved following this drone into a not-so-hidden cave, and playing a miniature stealth game of trying to avoid being noticed by any of the thugs or their security system. Also, a small side tangent, it turns out Sea Blue is actually running an illegal commercial fishing operation, and all of this is dolphin meat, so that's a thing. I did successfully make my way to the Sea Blue office, where I not only found the part that I needed, but also a few other slightly concerning things, like photos of me and all my friends. Surely they will be very pleased with being exposed as dolphin murderers, and none of this will ever come back to harm me again. I made my quick escape through a window and faded into the abyss, safely making it home for the rest of the night, and on to day 17. This morning, Sato stopped by to congratulate me on my new rare Marinka boss card, but also to introduce me to another fun minigame to play on Dave's phone. This one is called Gyao, and it's essentially a Tamagotchi minigame that allows you to raise little digital creatures and care for their needs. Now, this was introduced to me while I still thought it might be possible to 100% the game in 100 days, and let me tell you, this did not pan out for the Gyao. I did raise quite a few of them over the next 80-odd days, and you'll hear more about that later, but no, I did not manage to raise all the Gyao varieties. Anyways, this morning also came with a notice for a tuna party that was to take place in 3 days. The only problem is that tuna are quite hard to catch. Fortunately, Cobra had a solution for me. By combining these net traps with a specialized underwater drone, I could essentially tag some of the highest quality fish and send them directly back to the restaurant without filling my inventory. The number of charges on the drone is an upgradable thing, and that makes the long haul of this game significantly easier, so I was exceptionally grateful that I finally had access to it. With my new tool available, I set about the rest of the day diving for fish and harvesting resources while I was waiting on Dr. Bacon to create my new and improved diving suit. Along the way, I encountered our old friend the pink dolphin. I was a little worried about what I had learned about the real purpose of Sea Blue last night and their proclivities towards dolphins, hence I wanted to spread awareness about the pink dolphin. Hopefully, the more people that know about it makes it less likely to go bye-bye. Goodness knows they've already tried once. The rest of the day was smooth, just operations as normal between diving and running the restaurant. But there was, of course, another evening mission that had to be completed. This time for Miki and the whole Godzilla DLC. Apparently, Miki detected a strong spike in Godzilla's brainwaves and needed help investigating ASAP. So into her little submarine I went, and into the abyss we descended. While we were approaching Godzilla's cave, Miki confessed that she has thalassophobia, or the fear of the ocean. Personally, this is not a fear that I understand, because I've literally always wanted to be a marine biologist, but it's always funny to me when someone mentions it in an ocean-based game like this or Subnautica. As we grew increasingly close to where Godzilla was hibernating, a massive crustacean appeared. Now, I'm not exactly up to date on the Godzilla lore, but this is apparently Ebirah, another giant kaiju who first appeared in the Godzilla universe in 1966, so this guy is old. Ebirah did not like our submarine very much, and decided to let us know in a very non-confrontational manner. We decided we also need to let a little anger out, and tried to take down Ebirah, but that also did not go well. Ebirah made its way towards the surface, so we followed it to try and protect the people. Turns out that Godzilla had more or less the same plan, and was prepared to fight about it. Cue this very strange Mortal Kombat style boss fight with Godzilla vs. Ebirah. Now, I've never played Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or any of those style of games, so needless to say, I was not very good at this. Luckily, my lack of skill was not enough to overpower my insane amount of plot armor, and Ebirah did eventually recede. Then Godzilla just kinda walked away into the sunrise, but not before screaming into the sun. Also, he shot a laser, so that was cool. Also, Miki dropped some figurines into the water that are now a collectible for me to gather. So with that epic boss fight and an utter lack of sleep, we move on to day 18. I stopped by Bancho Sushi in the morning, and Bancho was clearly inspired by yesterday's events for a few new dishes to serve in the restaurant, which is a potentially great revenue source for me. Beyond that, Dr. Bacon had successfully finished my new thermal diving suit, which would allow me to explore the glacial area, and that's pretty much exactly what I did. The glacial area is, shockingly, glacially themed, with large ice pillars and typically cold water fauna. While the fish here are certainly amongst the most valuable for the sushi restaurant, I wasn't here to farm them just yet. Instead, I needed to find out more information about the divine tree, and that information could be found on a small tablet. I took a photo of that tablet for Dr. Bacon, who said that he should be able to translate it once I had returned to the surface. I also took a photo of this massive lion's mane jelly, which are actually cold water jellies, and they can be pretty huge. I wouldn't say that jellies are even my favorite Cnidarian, but I can appreciate a pretty animal of any variety. After wasting a bit more time gathering excess fish supplies, I returned to the surface so that Dr. Bacon could take a look at my photo of the Sea People tablet. Using some fancy technology, Dr. Bacon could make out that this inscription was some kind of spell, and I would likely need help from the Sea People priest to gather any further information. Too bad that would have to wait though, because I had tuna to catch. This also happened to be my first kelp forest environment that I saw in this playthrough, and kelp forests are my favorite ecosystem ever. As the lore of the Blue Hole states, There's a different environment every dive, and sometimes it's a generic coral reef, sometimes the limestone cave appears, and sometimes it's the kelp forest. That one is definitely my favorite. I especially love the detail of the kelp bending as you swim past it. This has nothing to do with the actual video, I just love kelp forest and want to make that everyone else's problem. My afternoon dive went swimmingly, so I headed over to the crop farm to pick my freshly grown wheat. While I was there, I talked to Otto about needing a nutritious food for the Sea People blacksmith, who still wasn't doing too hot. He gave me a crab pot, which should help me catch the horsehair crabs that I needed to help Dua feel a bit better. With that taken care of, I headed over to Bancho Sushi, because it was finally time to give Sammy his vegetable sushi that Bancho had promised him 3 days ago. Needless to say, Bancho crushed it, and Sammy was quite impressed. Right as Sammy was celebrating the incredible taste, Otto walked in and caused a bit of a scene. Turns out that Sammy was Otto's long-lost son, who Otto fell out of contact with after being stranded on an island for a few years. So that's festive. The two had an emotional reunion and vowed to stay up all night talking. Me, on the other hand, well, I had a restaurant to run, so that's what I did. All the way up until it was time for day 19. Right away in the morning, I got a call from Otto that I should stop by the crop farm before heading out for the day. When I got there, I saw that Sammy definitely takes after his father, and had managed to construct an entire chicken coop overnight. That coop will give me eggs every day to use in sushi recipes, and Sammy gets to enjoy some downtime with his father while still releasing rap music online. A win-win for everyone, I guess. Without any concrete objectives to be working on currently, I decided it would be a good day to focus on gathering fish and trying to build up my income a bit more so that I could afford more equipment upgrades. That mostly took the form of exporting tuna the way that Cobra showed me. This day was honestly an incredibly chill and relaxing break from all of the story progress, so I'm glad I took my time here. When I got back to Bancho Sushi to run the restaurant for the evening, a definitely unexpected guest showed up. The real-life musician MXM Tune, or real name Maya. Maya asked if Bancho could make some sea urchin sushi, and I agreed to take her diving tomorrow so we could catch some fresh. That is a tomorrow thing, however, because Bancho has a cooking show to compete in. Technically, the competition isn't for another 2 days, but the theme is Chinese food, and Bancho wants me to grab a handful of decently difficult ingredients, so that's another tomorrow thing. For tonight, I just ran the restaurant normally and made my way to day 20. Today was another chill day. The morning dive was spent like yesterday, just diving for fish and focusing on the restaurant's needs. The afternoon dive was slightly more involved, as that's when I took Maya on her diving expedition to get some green sea urchins. In the game, normal purple urchins can be found haphazardly along the ocean floor, but the green ones are tucked away in these little rock formations. So this side quest mostly involved me defending Maya from potential harm while she dug around in the rocks. This actually turned out to be a great mission for gathering extra white shark heads, but it still wouldn't be nearly enough to help me upgrade the whole roasted shark head dish all of the way. After a couple of rounds of fending off angry fish, Maya had enough green urchin for her requested dish and went off to the restaurant. I met her there and Bancho whipped up some chirashi sushi, which honestly seems incredible. Weird side tangent, but I could never eat sushi because I am deathly allergic to seaweed. Yes, I'm a marine biologist. Yes, I know that's weird. Trust me, I have heard it a million times. I just want to try real sushi someday. Maya seemed to enjoy her special bowl, and the other restaurant guests seemed to enjoy their tuna party that was happening around us. Little did I know that I too would get a little party, as Maya took the Bancho Sushi gang out back for a little private concert. Obviously, this music is copyrighted, so I can't include it here, but trust me, this was a cute scene and I loved it. As the mood faded into the horizon, it was time for day 21. After a couple of automation improvements to my aquaculture and farming operations, like expanding the fields and adding automatic egg collection, I decided it was time for me to get back into the main story. So for the first time in a few days, I made my way down to the Sea People village, where I immediately got distracted from my goal and set up a seaweed farm. That's good in the long run because it's an easy and steady supply of another resource, but not what we're focused on right now. I stopped by the temple to talk to Nyamo about the spell Dr. Bacon had found on the tablet that I had taken a photo of, and they said that there were 3 levers that I would need to flip to gain access to the Divine Tree control room. And we care about that because it's where all of the tremors are coming from. To access those levers, I needed to get into the chamber next to the tablet, and that required reciting a spell. Naturally, I don't speak Sea People, so Suwam got brought in again to do it for me. He did a zesty little jig to recite the spell, and open sesame, the door opened. So at long last, I made my way into the first glacial cave. Each glacial cave has its own small series of puzzles to solve, much like the process of getting through the glacial passage. This one had a few spinning dials, a few sharp tree trunks, and a boulder that needed to be plinkoed into some ice, but that's nothing that I couldn't handle. At the end of this passageway, there was a mural along with a large statue. Matching the statue's pose to the one of the mural triggers a cool device, and that triggers the first switch for the Divine Tree control room. We were already 1/3 of the way there. I couldn't progress to the next 2 caves just yet for lack of certain materials or help, So the rest of the day was dedicated to the relaxing fishing routine I'd enjoyed for the past 2 days. And once again, the restaurant portion is where things got interesting again, because it was time for round 2 of Star the Chef. Instead of a cutscene where Vincent just says that Bancho makes good food, this time there was a whole Cooking Mama style sequence, complete with QuickTime events, various cooking techniques, and a happy Bancho if I did things well enough. I don't know why I'm making the sushi when Bancho is a sushi expert, but here we are. I must have done it well enough though, because Bancho won handily over the opposing chef, whose fish dim sum wasn't good enough to cut it. The rest of the evening was pretty normal, and I passed smoothly onto day 22. This morning, Udo showed up to tell me about an interesting project in collaboration with the Weekly Fish magazine. They have a special radar that can detect one-of-a-kind unique fish within the blue hole. Each week, they'll send me a description and a rough location. Then I go there, catch that fish, and get paid. These guys are called Fishmon, which is definitely not another reference to another well-known franchise, and they are all pretty unique. I just have to catch them between Saturday morning and Sunday evening to get paid. This week's Fishmon was the humphead parrotfish, an easy catch for a diver of my caliber. And that talk with Udo and the grabbing the Fishmon were pretty much the only interesting things on day 22. I did unlock the sea turtle Gyao, which is just another unlockable, but nothing too special. When I headed back to the restaurant at night, Yui from Star the Chef showed up to say that the next challenger for their show would appear in 2 days, and that this time the theme was fish and chips, so that's something to look forward to. But for now, straight on to day 23. One might say that I got a little bit distracted today with testing out Jimbo's game on a few of the Sea People villagers. My first challenger was the dumpling maker Mina, and having previously never played poker or balatro in any capacity, that did not go well for me. In fact, it took me almost an hour to beat Mina's 3 aunties because I had no clue what was going on, but I did in fact get there eventually. Each villager I beat gives me a unique joker to use in future games, and Mina gave me the blueprint joker, which is one of my favorite jokers in real balatro. After spending far too much time trying to understand the game with Mina, I went and challenged the seed shop owner for another round. Now that I actually knew what was going on, this round went significantly more smoothly. Kazan gave me the shortcut joker, which I don't particularly care for, but is definitely useful in this mini version of balatro. At this point, my brain had fully locked in, so when I challenged Ramo to a game for her joker, I won easily. Easily enough that I beat her boss blind in just 1 hand, which is not bad for having struggled to play a high card just a few hours earlier. Riding my winner's high, I also challenged the seaweed farmer Gumo, and I won that duel too. At this point, I realized I was spiraling towards a balatro addiction, so I quickly left to gather some fish for the restaurant and headed back to the surface for the day. Once again, upon arriving to the restaurant, I met whom I hoped would be the last strange character I come across in this playthrough. A weathered old man by the name of Django came in complaining about the cold, despite Dave saying that the blue hole averaged 27 degrees Celsius during the night. That's 81 degrees in freedom units, or pretty warm on average, and definitely enough that Django won't freeze to death. He came in asking if there was a place he could plant some seeds, which is an unusual request, but I'm happy to oblige. After I asked what could be made with the spicy pepper seeds that he wanted me to plant, Django said that one of his friends loved the song Hot Pepper Tuna, which of course was written by our dear friend Sammy, and Django wanted to try the dish itself. So off I went to have a chat with Otto and Sammy about how to grow the peppers, then how to make the hot pepper tuna that Django wanted. It's gonna be a tomorrow problem because the peppers take time to grow, but the process was at least underway. So on to day 24 we go. I'd spent the last couple of days doing nothing to progress the story aside from going into one passage, so today I was dedicated to doing at least a little bit more story work. That involved going down to the Sea People village to deliver a horsehair crab that I had caught in the glacial area to Mina, who is going to use that crab to make a nutritious batch of steamed crab for the blacksmith. I brought the steamed crab over to Dua, and Mina must be as good of a cook as Bancho for Dua to have this level of reaction, but it did at least seem to make his cough better. Then I headed back to the glacial area to see if I could find a way into either of the other glacial caves. While exploring, I found an injured beluga whale, along with a venomous Arctic octopus who didn't seem too fond of me or of the beluga. It even taunted me, which was a little rude, not gonna lie. I chased this octopus all the way through the ice maze, where I eventually cornered it. The game then presented me with a choice, to harvest the octopus or to rescue it. Maybe it was my marine biologist's heart that made me not want to catch this one specific octopus, but I did decide to let it go, and it even left me a little present. Not that the rest of the Arctic octopodes will be getting away, mind you. I returned to the beluga to offer the antidote that the octopus had left behind, and the beluga was doing well enough to make its own way back to the Sea People village. I was exploring the glacial area a bit more when I came across this large door that was covered in a thick sheet of ice. No tool that I had access to would be enough to break through that much ice, but sometimes nature's tools work a bit better. And by that, I mean having a narwhal fling its tusk at the ice at full speed, and that did do the trick. Entering this cave launched me into a side-scrolling nightmare with a current pushing you into these horrid ice pillars, each of which rapidly drained my health, but fortunately I am a god gamer and I did make it to the end of the cave. Not unscathed, but I did make it. At the end of this horrible cavern, I found our old friend Suchi and his turtle Dana, the one we had rescued from a plastic bag what felt like ages ago. Suchi confessed that he got trapped here while looking for some new seaweeds, but can't seem to get out because of the heavy currents on one side and another thick sheet of ice on the other. Without a narwhal to do my dirty work, I had another unconventional solution for this dilemma, which did involve Suchi taking off all of his clothes. I used his clothes to make a slingshot to launch Dana at the wall, because that's an obvious way out and a little head trauma never hurt anyone. After repeatedly launching this poor turtle headfirst into a thick wall multiple times, it was finally enough to collapse the ice wall and allow me and Suchi to escape. And yes, he got his clothes back, at least for a little while, before this iconic cutscene started playing. I don't have anything else to say about this cutscene, but I really want you guys to have to watch it, so I'm just going to keep rambling for a little bit, and also Dave is an icon. With that whole endeavor over, I headed back to the surface so I could harvest the peppers that we grew for Django, and headed to the restaurant. I had forgotten that today was the fish and chips showdown for the Star the Chef, and that meant another cooking bancho section. I actually like these segments quite a lot. Maybe I should play a Cooking Mama game for once in my life, just like all of the other iconic childhood games that I haven't tried. Like I haven't played a Zelda game or a Pokemon game. Let me know if you guys want to see that at some point. Anyways, Bancho's unconventional fish and chips went up against a young Gordon Ramsay knockoff, and Bancho won easily, much to the chagrin of the young Gordon Ramsay knockoff. Vincent suggested that Bancho Sushi start serving cocktails to accompany such high-level cooking, and that means more work for me during dinner services. Unless I train my staff to do it for me, and that's exactly what I did, because I'm lazy. I also gave Django his hot pepper tuna in hopes that it would finally be enough to warm him up. It was warm enough to give him flashbacks to a snowy winter peak where he found a super hot pepper, so I'm going to call this a success. As thanks for our valiant efforts for making sushi, Django said that he would return to the restaurant every other afternoon with a specialty shop. Django's shop sells extra ingredients like the ones found in the red pots, extra vegetables, and some secret recipes, which I could be wrong, but I think these are the recipes you would otherwise unlock from training certain staff to certain levels. Django also sells truffles, aka the fancy fungus that high-end dining loves to use to make things taste like dirt, and Bancho Sushi isn't going to be any different. Truffle dishes are some of the most valuable, so we will be selling those for a tidy profit. Not unlike the rest of the sushi I sold normally in the restaurant tonight, which was enough to smoothly move on to day 25. I didn't want to waste any time today, so I headed straight back down to the glacial area. I was trying to find a way into this cavern I had discovered while chasing the octopus yesterday, when our beluga friend suddenly reappeared and offered to let me ride on its back through the high current. What followed was another auto-scroller, but instead of being forced forward by the current, I was fighting against it. And instead of losing my life on these ice pillars, the beluga could just headbutt its way through, which was mighty convenient for me. This cavern was filled with dangerous jellies that threatened my beluga friend's life, and at the end of the ride, we encountered a massive jelly. A massive phantom jelly, to be specific, and it was none too happy that we had intruded onto its space. That's valid, honestly. What's not valid is hurling jellies at my hapless beluga, so we're gonna sit here and headbutt this massive jelly till it collapses. Giant phantom jellies are actually a real kind of jelly, and they do actually kind of look like the one in-game. They are an exceedingly rare deepwater jelly that are known to live at depths of over 1,200 meters. Ironically, they can be found everywhere in the world, but not in the Arctic Ocean, which is a funny coincidence that it is guarding this particular cave, very much in the Arctic area. Anyways, several headbutts later was enough to take down the Phantom Jelly boss, and let me through the second door to the second Divine Tree control room lever. Pulling it triggered another mechanism that got me just one step closer to stopping the tremors throughout the blue hole. While making my way around the glacial area to gather more fish, I stumbled across this massive bowhead whale. These whales are the only baleen whales in Arctic and subarctic waters. Baleen is that hairy-looking stuff on a whale's mouth that allows a whale to filter feed for microorganisms like krill. Bowhead whales are also the longest living mammal known to humans, where a single whale can live to be more than 200 years old. This one just swam by, but it's still a cool cameo. I made my way back to the Sea People village to tell them about my victory over the Phantom Jelly, when several Sea People told me of their recent issues. Linchen told me that Selgio had gone missing again, and Gumo's manatee's baby had wandered off, so those are more tasks for me to deal with. After quickly dumping my inventory on the boat, I immediately headed back down to the glacial area to search for the baby manatee. I found it deep in a cave in the ice maze, where it needed some quick comfort before I could escort it out. Again, you should absolutely never touch manatees in real life. but I'm okay with a little suspension of disbelief in this virtual instance. The process of getting this baby manatee out of the cave safely was a mini boss rush between fending off narwhals, then fending off a poor beagle shark to get our tiny friend out. I did do so successfully, but I'd managed to fill up my inventory again, necessitating that I cut this dive short and return to the surface with my haul. Tonight also happened to be a marlin party at Bancho Sushi, which means serving up a ton of marlin-based dishes for a tidy profit. Along the way, Yui from Star the Chef showed up again. This time, it wasn't just Vincent with her, but instead she was joined by none other than Lois Crawford, that actress who cost Bancho his job at the Dugong Hotel however many years earlier. Apparently Crawford's review of the hotel had been plaguing her career as a food critic, and she had come back to take Bancho down once and for all. She brought her own challenger, nicknamed the Soul of Italy, for a pasta competition. Seems a bit unfair to me, but Bancho is up for the challenge, which will take place in 2 days. I need to gather ingredients for Bancho's dish, so it's time to move on to day 26. I headed back down to the Sea People village to talk to Gumo about the return of his baby manatee, which he seemed exceptionally grateful for, then decided it was time to finish my Balatro arc. I challenged Suom to a Balatro duel, which I did lose the first time around, having forgotten most of what I had learned when challenging everyone else. I think that broke something inside of me, so I absolutely demolished him on the second time. Then I approached my final challenger, the sleazy gambler Junak, who started this whole Balatro obsession. I actually got fairly lucky with my Joker pulls during this run, including both chip and malt Jokers, and that was enough to send me over his boss ante easily, thus ending the curse of Jimbo's game for the rest of the villagers. I can play it with Junak at any time though, and it is a great source of the Sea People currency, so that's something to keep in mind. From here, I made my way down to the hydrothermal vents for the very first time. This area is full of prehistoric creatures that haven't been seen in eons, like these tadpole-looking Arundospis that are actually jawless fish, or the Xenacanthus, which is actually a freshwater cartilaginous fish. None of these fish were as exciting as entering the third glacial cave though, which I admittedly needed some help with. That came from our best frenemy Suom, although technically he asked for my help, so take that Suom. This section of the game has split controls where you're managing both Dave and Suom at the same time. It's basically a co-op game for someone with no friends, so that's great. Most of the puzzles here are pretty easy, and they didn't take much time or effort to get through. That is, until we came across this large chamber inhabited by a Helicoprion. Shockingly, the Helicoprion did not want us there, and that sparked a tough boss fight. Helicoprions are probably one of the most iconic prehistoric shark relatives next to the Megalodon family, and that's mostly because of their tooth whorls. These guys didn't have traditional monitoring jaws like we think of in ocean predators today, but instead had some teeth-laden saw blades that gave Helicoprions their name. Helix is Greek for spiral, and prion means saw, so you get spiral saw or Helicoprion, as that's what their jaws look like. Unfortunately, because Helicoprions were cartilaginous fishes, we don't actually know what their skulls or bodies look like, because only their upper and lower jaws were fossilized, which leads to some pretty unique interpretations of what they could have looked like. Helicoprion's closest living relatives are actually chimeras, not sharks, which means that this guy's cousins are those Rhinochimeridae living in the deep dark deep down. They come down just the same with enough bullets, and that was plenty enough excitement for me. So Suom and I pulled off the final lever for the Divine Tree control room, and away we went. Or at least I would have, if John Watson hadn't showed up at the most inopportune time again. So here we go, to finally get rid of John Watson once and for all. Although this time it involved taking down an entire submarine. The trick for this particular fight was to get all of his tracking missiles to explode on his own sub, and that was going fairly well for me, but let's just say that nature had another plan. A plan called a massive Chronosaurus, that is. That thing absolutely yoked John Watson's puny sub, and I'm not sure he survived, and then it quickly turned its sights on me. I cannot escape boss fights today, apparently. Thankfully, a piece of John Watson's submarine had survived, and it was a missile launcher that I could use to take down this massive beast. With that missile launcher as my only option against a literal fire-breathing dinosaur, I tried my best to launch missiles as often as I could and avoided the rest of the Chronosaurus' attacks, which was not easy for me. I would do my normal info dumping about Chronosauruses here, but I honestly don't know a lot about them, so we're just gonna brush over the rest of this fight. But after a whole lot of dodging and a few lucky hits, this prehistoric monster was no more. Although everything should be out of the way by now, it turns out that the Divine Tree's roots have clogged the entrance to the control room, meaning I could progress no further. Just then, a mini-submarine appeared with a hologram of Dr. Bacon, who had been building this drone to help me explore the glacial area. A bit late, but it's the thought that counts. Duff helped build this drone and proceeded to make more obscure references to his favorite anime lore, but basically this drone can help me enter the control room by using a high-powered laser to cut through the tree's roots. Dr. Bacon said that this process would take 2 days for the drone to get through everything, which is all well and good with me because I needed a boss fight break at this point. And that was only the first dive of the day, but thankfully the second dive was significantly calmer. My only real objective was to go find Selgio, who just needed a bit more love and attention before I was able to safely return him to Linchen. Then it was just a matter of passing a finally normal restaurant evening without any visitors to make it to day 27. I couldn't make any story progression today since I was still waiting on Dr. Bacon's drone to open a route to the control room, but that wasn't going to stop me from simply enjoying the day by gathering fish and swimming around the glacial area. While I was down there, I encountered what the game touted to be a lone dolphin, specifically using the name Lissodelphus peroni, which is just the Latin for southern right whale dolphins. That is their full name, and yes, it is a bit confusing as southern right whales and southern right whale dolphins are not the same animal. Don't ask me, I didn't come up with it. There was a small pod of these guys hanging around, so I grabbed a quick photo before calling the day's diving a success and heading back to the restaurant, because it was time to take down the Soul of Italy in the last Star the Chef challenge. Once again, I returned to the kitchen for my final round of cooking QuickTime events and battered fish so that Boncho could win against his long-term op, Lois Crawford. Unsurprisingly, Boncho's unconventional Humboldt squid ink pasta won easily against the Soul of Italy's basic carbonara. The Soul of Italy did not take well to this and stormed out of the restaurant, so he didn't get to hear Vincent talking about how good his carbonara was. It still wasn't enough to outcompete Boncho's pasta that made Vincent feel, quote, he was diving into the dark, quiet sea naked at night, because that was a very necessary description. This whole debacle revealed that Lois's father was one of the biggest sponsors of Star the Chef, and Vincent had trained under him personally at his own first restaurant gig. Eventually, all of this led to Vincent convincing Lois to try Boncho's pasta, which Lois reluctantly agreed to. Boncho must be lacing his food with something, because the things people experience when eating it cannot be attributed to good cooking. Like being returned to your role as a movie spy and swimming through shrimp and squids sounds more like a weird trip than having a bite of pasta. Nevertheless, Lois was apparently pleased with the outcome, enough to admit her prejudice against Boncho and admit her mistake of being too influenced by a food's appearance. Surely that's not code for any deeper moral you could take from all of this. But Lois made Boncho, and by extension me, an unusual offer to open a branch restaurant. She says it's because there aren't many people who understand Boncho's food philosophy, and tasting it will wake them up to a new dimension of food. This all feels to me like an over-the-top explanation when just expanding your business model works just as well. I'm just the restaurant manager, what do I know? While we may have the staff available to run a branch restaurant, Boncho correctly points out that we do not have the capital. Lois steps in and says that she will fund the whole endeavor as well as all of the construction. Her one bite of Boncho's pasta was enough to convince her to literally build Boncho an entire restaurant, and you mean to tell me that it was just normal pasta? Also, what is with people in this game and doing impossible tasks overnight? But this was a heartwarming conclusion to Boncho's backstory, and I'm glad that I got to partake in it. So with that, it's time for day 28. Lois lived up to her word, because by morning, there wasn't indeed an entire extra restaurant waiting for me to staff and send ingredients to. In practice, the branch is a separate restaurant operation that functions at night, just like the normal restaurant. The only difference is that I don't actually have to do anything so long as I equip them properly, which is quite easy to do. So the branch will just sit in the background and generate more money for me. With the branch established, I headed down to the Sea People village to pay a visit to Mina for her famous dumplings, because these dumplings can buff certain stats, and I knew I was going to need some help for my real objective of the day, entering the Divine Tree control room. The tremors were getting more and more urgent, so I quickly swam through the glacial area when something shiny caught my eye. Mjolnir, as in Thor's special hammer. Dave was worthy of Mjolnir, which means as an extension of Dave, I am worthy of Mjolnir, and we will be putting it to good use. Realistically, Mjolnir has a chance to spawn throughout the glacial area and functions the same as another melee weapon. I just think it's cool because I'm a nerd. So now onto the real action. It's time for the climax of the story, the Divine Tree control room. The roots of the tree were covering up swaths of the room, and doors were blocked by centuries of tree sap building up. But I knew that I had to find a way down to the control room. There were some puzzles throughout this whole area, like this one that involved me placing a massive snail on a platform to raise it, only for the snail to wake up and cut off my axis a millisecond later. This area was also not without its fair share of threats, like these megalogropti that kept coming after me. Parts of the tree had also mutated, corrupting their fruits into little bombs that would explode if I held onto them for too long, but their blast was enough to open the doors that had been sealed by tree sap. The next section involved trying to avoid some flaming geysers that burned me if I even touched their smoke, which isn't actually all that unrealistic for deep-sea volcanoes. Getting through this area revealed a yucky, gooey substance coating the roots of the Divine Tree that was dotted with some gross-looking eggs. Those eggs started hatching almost immediately into baby Anomaloclaris, which I would find cute in nearly any other circumstance if they didn't start swimming towards me with intent to harm. Fortunately, they are no match for my steel net gun, but there was no way I had enough ammo to take out this many angry critters swimming at me. In this particular room, there was one of those fish head devices that I had used in the glacial passage with divine tree fruits to light up and melt some ice. And there was a divine tree fruit here right for picking, so guess what I did? The fruit is a deadly laser, and I will be using it to take down squalls of angry Anomaloclaris babies, and eventually to melt the yucky goop coating the door. Why it can be melted, I do not know, but here we are. The next room revealed a pulsating eye that Dave said was the nucleus of the divine tree, and it was absolutely coated in those pesky Anomaloclaris offspring. So I quickly cleaned them up with my steel net gun and stabilized the tree nucleus. All's well that ends well, except for in love and war, and baby, this is war, because guess who showed up? A truly massive Anomaloclaris who was none too pleased that I had killed her entire family tree while saving a divine one. Just as I was preparing to meet my maker, Dr. Bacon's drone showed up again and explained that this creature was Yowie, the creature that the evil sea person centuries ago had corrupted with divine tree fruits, and Dr. Bacon said that it had to go down. Duff had rigged this drone to act as a mini machine gun when necessary, so here we go, big boss fight time. This boss fight is a bullet hell style fight where I need to avoid everything coming at me while still dealing enough damage to my target, which is not a kind of game that I'm particularly good at. What I am good at is dumping a ton of mostly irrelevant information about marine critters, so here's your daily dose of Anomaloclaris lore. The name translates to unlike other shrimp, which is hilarious in its own right, but also the Anomaloclaris is a kind of arthropod in the extinct genus of radiodonts, and therefore they aren't all that removed from the crustaceans we know and love today. The name unlike other shrimp was likely meant to refer to their frontal appendages that other shrimp-like animals don't tend to have. These appendages likely made Anomaloclaris one of the ocean's first apex predators, and Yowie seems to agree with this tendency towards violence. Yowie wasn't that impressed by my machine gun, so Duff decided to up the ante by giving me a laser charge in a way to control time, so that's nifty. Duff also called this the Stella Star Laser after one of his beloved anime characters. Take that as you will. But back to your regularly scheduled info dump. There are multiple known species of Anomaloclaris around the world, with the best known being Anomaloclaris cadensis, named for the fact that it was discovered in Canada. And Anomaloclaris was also probably bigger than you thought it was with the shrimp comparison, considering they could reach up to about 2 feet, which is pretty big for a not shrimp. But Yowie definitely has them beat by just a little bit. This fight took a turn when it became a bullet hell side-scroller, and then a vertical scroller, but thankfully I made it through the majority of the fight with relatively little damage taken, despite Yowie's best efforts. Unfortunately for me, this long corridor Yowie was chasing me towards was a dead end. With nowhere left to turn, I did my level best to avoid becoming not unlike shrimp-sized bits of Dave, when Yowie missed me and ended up crashing into a wall, becoming entangled in the divine tree. The bad news was that the drone was damaged in the fight, and the laser was no longer operational, so I would have to come up with another solution to end Yowie once and for all. Quickly looking around, I saw some divine tree fruits, and another one of those fish head devices hanging from the ceiling. That was distinctly the wrong orientation for me to use it in, but as if on cue, my sea people friends showed up at exactly the right time to help me out. They raised the fish head, I loaded the fruit, and just like that, this millennia-old creature went out in a blaze of glory. With the sea people now safe in their village as the divine tree was stabilized, I returned to the surface to meet with my own people and finally relax after a long, hard journey. I deserve a night off, and all of my friends showed up to celebrate with me. With many beautiful moments and many difficult fights, the sea people were saved and everyone seemed to be enjoying their own special victories. Honestly, this cutscene might be my favorite part of the entire game, because seeing everyone happy after we had come to love and appreciate all of these characters in their own unique ways just sparks a certain kind of joy. This is also the only time we get to see Dave go to sleep after a long hard day, and we get to experience this very unusual dream about shooting aliens and developers. But just because I had finished the main objective did not mean I was done with this entire project. In fact, I still had a long road ahead of me. At the dawn of day 29, I had officially finished the storyline of Dave the Diver, and was left to my own devices to figure out what to do with the next 62 days of my in-game existence. Fortunately, I still had a couple more tasks that needed taken care of, but none of them were on a strict timeline anymore. For me, priority number 1 was getting every dish I possibly could to max level enhancement and training my staff for their highest potential. If you recall my earlier explanation of dish leveling from the whole roasted shark head, then you'll quickly realize that this is a much more substantial undertaking than I had led myself to believe. The majority of dishes are the simple sushi associated with that fish, so once you've caught every fish in quantity, you can level up its individual sushi so long as you have gathered 221 meat pieces from that fish. Obviously, that's the easiest to do with the fish that spawn in abundant swarms, because it means I can just go shoot my steel net gun at them for easy bulk harvesting, and enjoy the scenery along the way. Genuinely, one of my favorite aspects of Dave the Diver is its art style, particularly when it comes to the marine biology background details. For instance, I bet you didn't know that this thing in the deep dark deep down is called a ping pong tree sponge. And yes, that is a real animal that does in fact live deep dark deep down. While I completely understand that pixelated side-scrollers are not for everyone, I am incredibly impressed that all of the fish are actually pretty accurately portrayed compared to their real-life counterparts, despite being little 8-bit sprites. It actually made it even more fun for me to see if I could guess what a fish was before catching it as my own sort of minigame. That being said, I am still adamant that games should stop calling my favorite echinoderm starfish and swap to calling them sea stars. At least Dave the Diver has them properly underwater and not on the shore like many other games that I could name. But as I mentioned, I still had a few side tasks that I needed to take care of, like seeing the statue of Dave that the sea people installed in their village, which I think is an equal to the statue of King Long. I opened and staffed my branch restaurant fully, which gives me handy extra income so long as I send a couple fish their way every so often. And I went and took a photo of my favorite reason that conspiracy theorists use to say that there could be a megalodon hiding somewhere in the deep. Yes, people really use the example of a coelacanth, a fish native to deep underwater caves in Indonesia that no one had bothered to check for over 100 years, as the same thing as literally the biggest shark to have ever existed being extinct for several million years. Coelacanths are a pretty cool fish though, as they are technically lobed fin fishes, which are considered to be an earlier evolution of the ray fin fishes that make up the vast majority of what we know today as a fish. My ichthyology professor would therefore argue that every vertebrate is a fish, but that's a debate for another time. When I got back to the surface for my second dive of day 30, I was approached by a haggard old woman on a raft, who informed me that there was a dangerous shark around the blue hole that presumably murdered her husband, and I was going to have to hunt it down. Unfortunately for Clara, I had an ironically shark-themed party to attend that night, which I did and found quite lucrative. But while cleaning up from that wild sushi party, I heard Momo's meow off in the distance and made the decision to follow him. This is the second stealth-based portion of the game, in which we obviously want to follow our escaping kitty, but don't want him to know that we're getting too close. Because when we do eventually reach the end of the segment, we get to meet Momo's partner and child, who is obviously coming back to the restaurant with me, so I can take good care of it and give it plenty of food every day. The next morning started with a lovely visit from my humpback whale friends, so I finally got the picture of Mama and baby together, which was really the only exciting thing until my evening. Seeing as it was still storming from yesterday, I decided that it would be a good idea to finally avenge Clara's husband and fight Klaus, but not before I did some of my usual fishing around the blue hole. It was a good thing that I did too, because I found one of my favorite fishes in the game, the red-lipped batfish. These guys are objectively one of the ugliest sea creatures out there, and that's part of why I love them so much. Plus, batfishes and frogfishes are really cool fish. They don't even swim for the most part, they just kind of crawl around like little gremlins, and I love that for them. So with a picture of a batfish and a happy heart, I went and faced off against Clara's husband's nemesis, the giant white shark known as Klaus. The Klaus fight is a pretty standard boss fight with a lot less gimmicks than many of the other boss fights in this game, so it was just a matter of dealing enough damage while avoiding the whirlpools, and I was pretty much good to go. After all of that effort, Clara says that she was finally able to complete her long-awaited revenge, which I did everything, but congrats I guess. Anyways, she gave me a Klaus tooth necklace to add to my souvenir collection, and I was off to open Bancho Sushi for the night. Turns out I should have done that before going on my nighttime excursion, because there was an unusual guest waiting for me. He only introduced himself as a fellow alchemist, but asked that I retrieve a magic cauldron for him that could only be found, you guessed it, at night in the blue hole. So you're gonna have to wait until tomorrow, bud. So after a day full of weird encounters and a lackluster dinner service, I'm off to day 32. This was the day that I realized I could customize my boat in addition to my restaurant, so now it has this nice blue wave pattern. After that, I spent a while calling in every operator code I could get my grubby little hands on. So, in Dave the Diver, there's a weird mechanic for unlocking bonus cosmetics via the operator contact on your phone. Throughout the game, you can find little Easter eggs, like this message on the back of John Watson's crashed submarine that says, "See blue forever." You're supposed to take these little codes and type them in after calling the operator, and that unlocks something special for you. Now, this was during the part of the recording where I still thought it was possible to 100% the game in 100 days, so I went searching high and low for every possible operator unlock I could find, of which there were a grand total of 16. My personal favorite was this ukulele charm that became a feature in the rest of this video in case you're wondering how I got that. If you're really curious, leave a comment asking for an operator code, and I shall grant your wish for one you may or may not have seen before. Anyways, I spent the rest of my day as one normally does as a diver, but I took a little detour to the Sea People village to go gambling and feed my Balatro addiction, while still technically making progress on this project. While I was running around afterwards, I found a Greenland shark fall down in one of the glacial passages. You may have heard of whale falls from things like this viral EV Nautilus video, in which the carcass of a large marine animal will fall down to the bottom of the water column and feed countless animals in the deep dark deep down, which is indeed a very real thing and a very cool thing at that. And I was really happy to see Dave the Diver include that in some way, shape, or form. Here it was a deceased Greenland shark that became a meal for some giant isopods, which I of course had to get a photo of. I just thought this whole interaction was neat, and that's pretty much it. That evening, I once again went night diving to retrieve our fellow alchemist's little cauldron, which was a success. I returned it to him once I had surfaced, for which he kindly gifted me a magic mortar. The magic mortar actually has practical applications because you can use it to make seaweed potions to boost your stats, or you can use it to grind meat to make bait for crab traps, which is mostly what I ended up doing. So after smashing a few fish together and serving some people some sushi, I was ready for day 33. After this amount of time, I decided I was finally ready to upgrade my cooksta level to platinum. This isn't even the highest level, but I put it off for long enough that it was starting to annoy me a bit. For the rest of the day, I spent some time finishing the Depths Moringa collection. The next day, I also completed the Glacial Area Moringa collection, in addition to beating yet another strange person who had wandered into Bancho Sushi. This guy said people called him the Mushroomer and that he was directed here by the alchemist we had helped a couple days ago. The Mushroomer is here to sell us some special rainbow cap mushrooms, which are used in some fancy high-end recipes. I am personally not sure about the use of what could be magic mushrooms in a dish that we are selling to people at a restaurant, but honestly, whatever at this point. Enough has happened in this world that I'm not sure anyone would be fazed after literally seeing Godzilla. The Mushroomer says that these mushrooms are definitely safe to consume no matter how they are cooked, even after Dave rightly points out that colorful mushrooms are often poisonous and should not be consumed. The wink really makes me trust him. He also says he'll teach Django how to gather the rainbow cap mushrooms so we can purchase more from him whenever we need. Now Django is peddling in two kinds of elusive fungus between the truffles and the rainbow cap mushrooms. Maybe that explains why he can't regulate his body temperature. But that was pretty much it for day 34. Days 35 and 36 passed similarly without too much happening. It was just a matter of swimming around to gather fish and upgrading everything else I possibly could, which included all of the seaweed seed types, my iDiver app, my fish farm, and my crop farm all to max level with all of the available upgrades. At this point, by the dawn of day 37, I had completed the vast majority of gameplay that Dave has to offer. So with the story and side missions all but finished, I set my sights on getting as close to 100%ing this game as I possibly could. As I mentioned a while ago, you cannot 100% Dave the Diver in 100 days for a few reasons, and the second one comes down to unlocking all of the recipes. The unlocking mechanism for recipes in Dave is tied directly to the success of your restaurant. Happy guests give high ratings and unhappy guests give low ratings. There are some other factors that play into this, like the taste rating of a dish, but basically good service equals good rating. At the end of the night, those ratings are averaged, and you receive flames that can be used as currency in the research tab of the restaurant. You can receive a maximum of 5 flames a night, with the majority of nights being between 4.8 to 5 flames for this playthrough. I'm pretty sure that the lowest flame rating that I got at all during the 100 days was about 4.6, so I feel like I did pretty darn well. All of that effort netted me a grand total of roughly 480 flames to spend. Most recipes cost 5 to 7 flames to unlock, with really special dishes costing about 15 flames. Just to do some easy and simplified math, because I didn't keep track of all the flames I spent while unlocking everything, and the wiki doesn't have that information, let's just assume that every recipe costs 7 flames to unlock, which is likely lowballing a little bit considering that most are in that 12 to 15 range. There are a total of 97 advanced recipes that need to be unlocked in the research tab. 97 recipes times 7 flames to unlock comes out to 679 flames needed, plus the 9 flames that I did not count to unlock all of the boss dishes. So if I did manage to get a perfect 5 flame rating every night Bancho Sushi was open, I'd have a total of 500 available flames, which is still 188 flames short of the amount necessary to unlock every recipe. So that's yet another reason that reaching 100% completion in 100 days would never work. Also, as another bonus marine biology fact, whenever you upgrade a dish, it'll play one of a few cutscenes. My favorite of these cutscenes involves this particular fish, who is supposed to look absolutely shocked at the sharpness of Bancho's knife. But in actual ichthyology, this kind of face is known as the face of death, due to it having a strong resemblance towards predatory fish, and it makes me laugh whenever this cutscene plays. By day 50, I was set into a routine for my dives and behavior patterns, so here's how the majority of the last 50 days went. Every morning, I went to go check the crops on my farm. I got quite annoyed with Otto when he clapped every single time I picked a crop. Then I collected eggs, and fertilized and replanted everything when necessary. I tried to bulk farm crops I knew I would need a lot of, like cucumbers for the decently frequent cucumber parties that were being held around the blue hole. Then I headed over to my aquaculture setup to ship over any fish that had reproduced overnight. I know it seems like a bit of a waste to keep 2 of every single fish variety in my tanks given their limited space, but it really isn't that bad if your setup is at max level with high capacity. I also used all of the excess low-tier fish to make high-quality bait for my crab traps in the mortar and pestle, since each bait ball required 12 fish to make. This gave me a relatively steady supply of most of the ingredients I needed to keep Bancho Sushi running smoothly while I went out diving. During the dives themselves, I was mostly focusing on gathering fish I knew I would need a lot of that wouldn't necessarily be as easily farmed in mass quantities by my aquaculture setup. This was namely some of the unique fish that only spawn in certain areas in small quantities. like the snub-nosed spiny eel that only spawns in the third glacial cave. That meant that every single dive I did, I needed to visit the third glacial cave in order to get one snub-nosed eel, because the single, limited spawn fish was used in 3 advanced recipes. There were rare instances, like one of my dives on day 64, where I got 3 snub-nosed spiny eels, but those instances were few and far between, so my route had to be consistent and I had to do it twice every day. Yes, it was quite a pain. While I was busy running around on my set route every day, I of course made sure to maintain my seaweed farm for my underwater crops, and I served xenacanthus meat for sushi every day. I specifically chose xenacanthus, not only because it was decently easy to farm in bulk quantities between the aquaculture setup and exporting it with my steel net gun and drones, but also because it was an expensive meat that wasn't used in any other recipes. That meant by serving xenacanthus sushi, I wasn't limiting my progression of other dishes that may have required the same ingredients. That was until I managed to fully upgrade the majority of dishes containing rice, Titan triggerfish, harlequin hind, and coral trout. If you've played Dave the Diver before, you'll recognize that list as the ingredients required to make the tropical fish sushi set, i.e. one of the best dishes to sell at Bancho Sushi. The reason it's one of the best is because, for the low cost of 3 of each of those ingredients, you get 9 servings of a dish that sells for 1,387 gold each. AKA it's an infinite money glitch given that the main branch only serves about 45 people at night. So if I made 5 sets of tropical fish sushi, I was making roughly 62,000 gold a night from the main branch alone. That money was primarily spent on training my staff to be more efficient, because the higher their level, the more money it costs to train them. It took until day 74 to get my first staff member to the maximum level of 20, which that upgrade from level 19 to level 20 alone costs 99,000 gold. A bonus factoid I learned from this whole endeavor was that if you do train a staff member to level 20, the next day Bancho will make a quote-unquote introduction post on your cooks to feed. Not gonna lie, it feels weird to only introduce a staff member after I've already spent 325,000 gold on their training, but whatever. The first staff member who I got to this point was Raptor, who is not only a fantastic server, but also wears a dino mask everywhere, which is really why I chose him in the first place. Eventually, I got all of my core restaurant staff to level 20, but Raptor is still my favorite. I also did manage to hire every single person in the game, most of whom were just sent on dispatch every day to fetch ingredients for me. Along with my route fishing and money grinding, I was also trying to finish as many of the collectibles as I could. This included taking care of the many Yao and rebirthing as soon as I unlocked a new one. It made me unreasonably sad to rebirth my whale shark Yao because I absolutely love whale sharks and I did not feel like a trumpet fish was an appropriate following act, but to each their own. Day 55 marked the end of collecting all of the Marinka cards because I learned that you can only catch ruby sea dragons after harvesting ruby nodes in the hydrothermal vents area, and it's only a chance to spawn, so it took a while, but we did get there. And Sato of course had to tell me that finishing the Marinka card collection revealed a secret hidden bonus card for a final boss known as Luska, who, while looking quite intimidating as a half-shark, half-cephalopod, was actually quite easy to take down with my very overpowered gear at this point. Other collectibles included all of the Godzilla figurines, which I expected to trigger another boss fight, but really I was just given a statue to display in the restaurant, and the weekly Fishmon, which weren't anything special aside from making sure that I picked them up each week. There were also some other kinds of collaborations or small DLC that I didn't have access to, like the Dredge DLC or the newer Ichiban's Holiday DLC, so obviously that will not be included in the remainder of my adventures, but I am happy that I got to experience the Godzilla DLC and some of the other integrations like Balatro or the MXM2 collab. One of the other fun things that I noticed was that on in-game days that are real-life holidays like Halloween, Bancho Sushi will have mini decorations to mirror that holiday, so that meant cute reindeer stickers on Christmas and bright neon signs for the New Year. Fortunately for me and for my mental health though, New Year's would be the last holiday that I saw, because just 6 days later on January 7th, I served my last dinner. And with that, we come to the dawn of day 101, and officially the end of my 100 days in Dave the Diver. I may not have been able to accomplish my original concept of 100%ing the game in that time, but here's everything I did accomplish. I got a grand total of 82 recipes to max level, including all of the recipes containing truffle or rainbow cap mushrooms. I got all of my main restaurant staff to level 20, and every other hireable staff member to at least level 10 if not higher. I collected every animal in the game, and I 100%ed Marinka, Eco Watcher, and raised 10 different Gao. I'd say that's a pretty good run for 100 days. This project was a ton of fun, and also a whole lot of effort. This script alone is 33 pages long. Bancho Sushi managed to get 3,000 likes on Cooksta, so if you enjoyed this video, perhaps hit the like button so we can get 3,000 likes here too. Anyways, I think that's everything from me for now. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed this, and let me know if you want to see similar videos in the future. But until then, have a great day.